Hey, welcome to Madness Works. Today we're going to be talking about how to do some epoxy projects. Just a few tips and tricks that I picked up along my time with working with epoxy, and I want to share with you guys. So stay tuned. All right, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working with a project that I made a while ago, but my CNC messed up. It was supposed to be a tray, as you can see, kind of got out of hand up here near the top. So we're going to cut out this middle section right here and reuse this project. So instead of making a brand new project, we're going to try to salvage this one and see what we can do. So I can create an epoxy project out of this and help you guys understand my tips and tricks. All right, we got it all cut out. I'm gonna sand the sides, sand them down a little bit, get them smooth, and then we're gonna go ahead and prepare it for epoxy. Now, when you're sanding, you want to make sure that you're sanding with the grain, especially. My concern that I want to show you guys here is this knot right here. I'm just gonna hit it with some CA glue, get it to set real quick, and then we're going to move on, so that way no epoxy has the ability to seep through. So what I meant when you're sanding and the grit doesn't matter is for the surface that you're going to be pouring the epoxy. And the reason that that doesn't matter is because the epoxy itself is going to create a really smooth finish. You don't got to sand all the way down to 5,000 grit sanding paper to get that super glass smoothness, because your epoxy is going to do that for you. So any surface that's not going to have the epoxy on it, you definitely want to sand it down or as high of a grit as you can get to. If you're asking about the color discoloration, I just wanted to see what black stain would look like on this project. After the CNC messed it up, I just hit it with some black stain to see how, if it would make anything pop out. When you're preparing your project for epoxy, you want to make sure you glove up, because what you want to do is you want to make sure you're preventing oils from getting into your project, or oils from your hands. So I'm just going to use some mineral spirits. I know this is an isopropyl alcohol container. It's got a little pour spout that I like to use. It makes it easier. When you're preparing your surface with either mineral spirits, isopropyl alcohol, if you use isopropyl alcohol, make sure it's a high percentage. I've been using 70%. I haven't had any issues with it, but I have read some people say that it will leave a residue behind. Again, I haven't run into that. I switched to mineral spirits because of the hardwoods that I'm working with. I don't want to ruin the project. I don't want a chance ruining the project just because I'm trying to cheap out with some rubbing alcohol. What we're doing right now, not only are we getting rid of the oils from our hands, but we're getting rid of any residual sawdust, because I did blow it all off with a air compressor, some compressed air, and I'm just making sure that we have a good surface for the epoxy to adhere to. And we don't want any residual sawdust coming up and ruining our day. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but in between each coat that we do for the epoxy, after we do a sanding of the epoxy and we pour our next coat, in between that, we're gonna clean it again. You gotta get that dust off. You gotta get those oily fingerprints off. Now, one of the important things about using epoxy is you want a dust-free environment. So being here in my shop, it's not the most dust-free environment. So we're gonna throw it in this container. Go ahead and throw a cover on it, and we're gonna go ahead and let it dry. Here we are again in the garage. I know that I told you guys to have a dust-free environment is best for your projects. Wife got home from work and I can't do these videos in the kitchen, it's just too loud. So we're gonna chance it a little bit and hope that it's not too dusty out here, even though I just got done, or I'm in the middle of working with another project. What we're gonna do is we're gonna hit this again with some of that mineral spirits. And all we're doing is we're taking off any possibility of there being any residue on the surface of this project. Oils, anything that could affect the way that the epoxy is gonna seep onto the project. Pretty simple. The next thing we're gonna do is we have these grooves right here. So I wanna make sure that my epoxy levels really well on top of the surface for this project. With these grooves right here, these are just ramps for the epoxy to wanna just run down. So, two different types of tape you can use. You can use painter's tape or use duct tape. I like using the duct tape, it's a little bit stronger. When you pull on the painter's tape, it could rip and you end up freaking out because you gotta find another piece to grab and try to rip it off. Yeah, I know I said I was gonna do the perimeter, but before we do the perimeter, I'm gonna flip this bad boy over. So I have a ripped edge, a perforated edge, and a straight edge. We're gonna use the straight edge on the edge of the project. So you just wanna make sure you get close enough. You just wanna make sure you get close enough. It doesn't have to be exact, but pretty close. Let's see, this one decided it wanted to roll over on the edge, so we'll get rid of that little piece, and hopefully it's the perfect size for the sides. So I just folded this edge right here, if you saw that. I did that because I didn't want it to stick over the edge over here. Now when you put this tape on, you don't want to leave it on too long. And what I mean by too long is, it can't sit there for a couple months, because it will start losing its grip. Or it could, I should say, it could start losing its grip. I did have that happen to one project. I tried sealing it back down, and it would just give up a little bit here and there and allow the epoxy to run under. I know, you're asking, what the heck is this for? Just give me a second, all right? Give me a second. A little suspense never hurt no one, right? Oh, that one went over a little bit. So it's okay to be short on the edge, like you see how you see a little bit white, but you really don't want it to go over. If it goes over a very, very, very small amount, it'll be okay. So what's gonna happen is, when I do my flood pour of my epoxy, I'm gonna pour it on top, and it's just gonna wanna roll over the edges. And if you're familiar with working with epoxy, you get all those bubbles on the bottom. This tape, all you do is you grab the tape and pull it, and the bubbles literally just start popping off. So make sure you're in an area where you can control where those little bubbles of epoxy go. I call them bubbles, but I'm talking about the drips. So make sure that those drips just don't, because they will go flying all over your house. Maybe not all over your house, but all over the room that you're in. So make sure you're controlling that. Probably have to put like a backboard up against your trash or something. Make sure it collects it all. All right, now that we got the underneath done, we're gonna do the perimeter. Now, you don't always need this perimeter. If my piece were perfectly flat, I wouldn't really need the perimeter. I'm using the perimeter because of the pieces right here on the edges where it's gonna create a ramp and it's just gonna want to flood off of it. What I'm doing is I'm creating a wall so that way it can hold the epoxy inside of it. And when you pour it, it'll make its way all over to the edge and it'll settle. And what you wanna do is you wanna just let it settle. And I don't know, 20, 30 minutes, let it sit there, and then just rip the tape off and let it flow over the edges. This one doesn't really matter what side you do, but what I do want to do is I want to start here, and then I'm going to curve right around the edge. So I want to have a good seal right around that corner. There you go. So now this is ready to go back into the tray, and we're going to mix up some epoxy. Do a little pouring of epoxy. All right, epoxy. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different than what people say you shouldn't do all over the internet. I've been working with epoxy. I used it as a kid, but I don't remember mixing it when I was in grade school. I was like in 6th, 8th grade, something like that. And I don't remember mixing it, so I think my teacher mixed it. I remember how good the projects came out, and I was like, wow, I really want to do another epoxy one. Over COVID, I got way into woodworking again. And one of the things I wanted to do was I wasn't really liking the methods that are out there for protecting your wood projects. And a lot of them bubble, they're so sensitive, and epoxy, if you know what you're doing, it comes out really nice. Even a few minor flaws, it still looks really good. So if you're not too critical on yourself, just
you know how it is. Like an artist, they see the imperfections. The customer, they're just going to see beauty all throughout. So as long as you don't point out the imperfections that you see, more likely you're not going to see it. And they're going to be very, very minute, you know, like super unimportant. It's not going to break your project being a good project. So I tried using these reusable ones, and the little bubbles, I can't get the little bubbles out of the container. It's a lot of them. I actually prefer these little, I call them bathroom cups, you know, for mouthwash. Just grab two of them. Don't worry about the epoxy that I'm using. They ain't getting a shout out. They ain't paying me, they ain't getting a shout out. So the epoxy that I'm using is a 1-to-1 ratio. That makes things super easy. Don't weigh it, measure it, okay? That's the best way of getting your epoxy. I need my little popsicle stick. There you go. This is just a little epoxy kit I bought off of Amazon. Originally, I was using a basic plastic crocheting needle, something to that effect, and I would mix my stuff with it because it came to a point where it was like this long purple giant egg at the end of it. I just take the end with the pointer, and I would just mix my epoxy, and it did great. When I would get done, I'd take a paper towel, soak it with some rubbing alcohol, and just wipe off the epoxy. So what I'm going to do is these cups. The other reason I like them is they have these ridges right here. So if you just count your ridges, you're going to be putting the same amount in each cup. You know, these little cups, I guess. So yeah, this silicone mat, I'm using it. I just don't want epoxy on my tabletop here. So I used to use the it's called Family Wood epoxy. It works really well. I did stop using it because price. You get a lot more epoxy from other epoxies for a better price. I mixed A and B. Usually I do this inside the house, and I can use Alexa to set a timer. Guess where my other timer is? Right there. What I'm about to do is probably gonna make some people freak the heck out. But I tried all these tips people provide. This whole placing your epoxy in hot water to help with the bubbles, and that stuff hardened as I was stirring it in less than like 3 minutes. So needless to say, I'm not a fan. Mixing gets tiring. Don't give a crap about the color, right? No, you stop it. People are gonna be like, oh my god, you're putting so much air bubbles in there. They're gonna come out. They are. If you prepped your wood properly, you clear coated your wood, the bubbles are gonna come out. It's not the bubbles, in my opinion, not the bubbles that are in the epoxy that's the problem. It's the bubbles afterwards. Now, granted, if you're working with deep pour epoxy, because I'm using tabletop, if you're working with deep pour and you're pouring giant molds, I mean, that's different. I don't have the experience with those, with the deep pours, the molds. Tabletop is what I use, and I use the heat gun, guys. I don't use a torch. The torch, if you overdo it, it's going to ruin your project. I highly recommend staying away from the torch. Temperature, I don't even know what temperature it is outside right now. I think it's in the 50s. I don't have issues with temperature being out low. My stuff cures within 24 hours. I usually do bring it inside the house, and it's about 70 inside the house. And hopefully that train's not drowning me out right now. I'm doing a lot of talking right now, so I don't know how long this video is going to be. Right now we're going to have 11 minutes just this part. I'm going to stop talking. We're going to do the rest of this part of the video. surface out. Scrape off some of the epoxy from these little mixers. So when you get the hardener by itself or the epoxy and you get it on the surface, it gets real sticky and it's not going to cure. So what I like to do to help cleaning with that is I just put this right in that area and hope that the epoxy drips down, gets around all that hardener and the mixed epoxy. I hope it gets around the hardener, and that way it'll be easier to get off. What we're gonna do now is hold on tight, because we're gonna move the camera over there. All right, so now I'm gonna pour the epoxy onto the project. Now, besides wearing gloves because you're mixing it and you don't want to get it on your fingers, I'm about to show you the real reason why you want to wear gloves. So, pour away. You know, they do say that the epoxy is auto-leveling. Yes, but it's not perfect. You're gonna get voids, and what I mean by voids is spots where it's like how oil and vinegar mixes. It's not gonna sit right. My hat's freaking crooked. You guys didn't tell me my hat's crooked. All right, well, you have to deal with it. Okay. The most important tool when you're working with epoxy. This guy right here, this. So what you want to do is take your finger and just rub it across the surface of your project. Get in there. I call it massaging the wood, massaging the epoxy into the wood. Like I have a spot right here. Right there, no epoxy's flooding into that area, right? There's nothing saying that it might not eventually do it, but we're gonna do it. Using sticks, not as good of a method. Get it in there. And so what I'm feeling is I'm pushing all the way down to the surface of the wood. And you're gonna feel like surface tension in the wood when you do this. You're gonna hit a spot that's really, it feels dry. Even though it's on the epoxy, it feels dry. And what we're doing is we're rubbing the epoxy into the surface of the wood so it actually sits on the wood. And then what it's going to do is it's going to self-level into those areas. The little, I forget what they're called, the little painter stands or whatever underneath the red things underneath here. They keep moving around on them. This is the secret to making sure that you don't get those low areas with your epoxy. Next up is the heat gun. So you might have heard me, I'm running the heat gun. There might be dust inside of it, so I'm just gonna run it before I run it over my project. I really like the heat gun a lot better than using a torch. I really don't like using a torch. I used a torch once. I think I said this earlier. It completely destroyed my project. All right, I figured you guys would probably want to see this. We're gonna pick that area right over there. So right here. I get the heat gun running, get it warmed up a little bit. Yeah, bubbles. I recommend every 5 or 10 minutes coming back, hitting it with the heat gun.
Get those bubbles out. And once you get the bubbles out of the epoxy, they're not going to rise out of the wood as long as the wood was coated properly. So my concerns are this spot right here, over here, and right here, and then everything cut out in the middle. Those are what I'm concerned where I'm going to get air bubbles from. Everywhere else, I think I should be all right and be able to get the air bubbles. And what's going to happen is over time, you're just going to continue using your heat gun, getting rid of the air bubbles, and then you're just going to get one, like, not a micro size, but like a small size air bubble popping out of those knots probably. But let's see what happens. All right, so now we're gonna move on, and we need to get a new pair of gloves. When you're working epoxy, you're gonna go through gloves, so buy some that are easy to put on. I have a set that are really tough to put on, and I can't stand them. I hate them so much. We're taking the tape off that we put around the edge, the perimeter. Man, balls are gone. Bubbles are gone. So we're gonna remove the tape. Now, remember, we're not only putting on the gloves to protect our fingers from getting epoxy on when we've taken it off the tape, but now we have to massage the sides. When you let the epoxy run over the sides, the epoxy is gonna have areas where none of it's gonna touch, and it's just gonna follow a path of least resistance. As soon as a drip makes contact with the bottom of the board and with the bottom of your project and starts running and dripping, the rest of it's just gonna flow in that direction. So any surface tension in any of the other areas are gonna prevent the epoxy from touching those areas. So all you gotta do is just run your finger across, massage it just like this, you know, get around those edges. The thing that sucks is you gotta be quick with pulling this tape off. So once you get it going, commit, because that epoxy is gonna start flowing. The other tip I got is if you do get epoxy or resin or anything, the hardener on your hand, just go in and throw some rubbing alcohol on your hands, rub your hands around, you know, if you need to put a little bit more on, rub your hands around, and then just soap and water, wash right off. That's what I do. I have no issues. I'm trying to figure out the best spot to get this. All right, so you see how right there, it's just all drop it there, you ain't getting nothing here. Man, I really hope I didn't get epoxy all over my phone. All right, so just find an area where it starts dripping. And this stuff's sitting quick today. We just start rubbing it across the surface. The epoxy set up really quick tonight. I've never had some set up so quickly. Maybe I just misjudged my time a little bit. I thought it was only about 15 minutes. Maybe it was 20 or 25, I don't know, but it got thick quick. But I was able to get around the edges. Hopefully it sits good. I don't see any reason it shouldn't. I'm gonna hit it with the heat gun again, and then I might check it one more time and then just let it do its thing overnight. And I did have some microscopic bubbles popping off, but the heat gun softened up the epoxy a little bit and just started running over the edge. So it's actually looking really good. I really didn't want to do a second coat, but for the video I know I'm going to have to. I got a few areas that are of concern anyway. Let's see, where the heck's my hair? Under my finger in this corner right here. I have like a dry spot. I don't know if you can see that. But right there, that's one of those spots where I was trying to prevent it by massaging the wood. But when the tape was there, my finger probably didn't get there good enough. So, and I'm getting this, I've never gotten that before. I'm getting this foamy bubble thing going on over here, but I'm not worried about it. So a little sanding, second coat should take care of that, I would think. All right, our project should be cured. Let's go ahead and take a peek. Look at that gloss finish. All right, here comes the part that you're all waiting for. We're gonna pop the drips off at the bottom. So I'm just putting in this cardboard box, so that way when the drips pop off, they don't go flying everywhere. Don't forget to put your epoxy dust-free tray away. Leave it open too long, introducing dust. You don't want to do that. All right, what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our knife and go ahead and cut off the rest of the bubbles, do some cleanup that we have. Make sure you got your gloves on for safety so you don't cut yourself. All right, and so what I noticed is right here where that knot was, got a little epoxy seep through. It wasn't much, it was enough just to be there. So we're gonna go ahead and sand the bottom of this, give it a good rough sanding, then a light sanding, and we should be good to go. Had to close the garage door because a rainstorm just rolled in and I felt it hitting me, so I was like, gotta preserve those tools. So all I'm doing is, again, just a light sanding of the edges, just where I popped off the epoxy, because there will be a tiny bit of a, I call it a sharp edge. You'll understand what I mean when you do it. So I'm just gonna sand it real quick, and then I'm gonna hit it with my orbital sander to just smooth it out and get rid of the little blood stains from the sharp epoxy. All right, here she is. Look at that glass finish, guys. Glass mirror finish. Now, if it wasn't for that knot, probably look a little bit better. I could have went all kinds of ways with this guy. I could have infilled all those cut pieces with color, but this was a real simple project that I wanted to do just to show you guys a few things here and there. It may not be an extravagant project, but it's still a good looking project. So just like I tell many people, working with epoxy, it's a learning process. It's not hard. What you do got to do is know that you're going to run across some hiccups here and there. I ran through some hiccups today where, for example, when I was pulling the tape off and the drips weren't just popping off, sometimes you just pull on it and they just pop right off. You know, and just in case you didn't catch it one more time, they pop off. So yeah, that was a little hiccup that I had to adjust to. Working with a blade, make sure you wear hand protection. You feel really confident with the blade. Have a first aid kit nearby. Wear gloves. Wear gloves when you're using that blade to try to cut off any residual bubbles. Not bubbles, but the drips. It's once you start producing stuff that starts coming out how you want it to come out, your confidence level is going to skyrocket. It's just going to take off. Just don't give up. Keep working at it. Keep trying. Like I explained to other people, another thing is I work with epoxy and wood. So that's what I'm most familiar with. The only thing I could see with working with molds is you got to have mold release, a lot deeper of a pour. So that's not something I really have a lot of experience with. A lot of these tips, I'm sure a lot of them apply. So you want to make sure paying attention, picking the right epoxy, pick good epoxy, and experiment. You got to experiment and try different things. I'll tell you, before I had these plastic containers to try to keep dust out, I was using giant boot boxes, and I would just duct tape the inside, so that way when I had the overflow of epoxy, the duct tape would just catch it and it would keep it from leaking through the box. So come up with different ideas and keep working at it. Don't give up. That's the important thing. Don't give up. So get out there, explore, and have fun. Until next time, see you later. Check this out. Oh, that's a good one.